It's going to be another fantastic one. Obviously, Glory is our player going through to the global finals or the world championship. Sorry, later this year. He's been playing out of his mind, as have all of the other Japanese players, I feel like, over Season 1. And now is the time to prove that he's still got it in Season 2, up against Flurry, who had a decidedly different story last season.
I definitely agree. And I'm so excited for this rogue from Glory. I'm going to say it, it's been a while since we've seen a tried and true aggro deck just with no other win condition than going face. And this list from Glory has absolutely no legendaries, but I'll tell you what it does have: a bunch of stealth minions, including Organ Infiltrator, Burrowing Scorpid, and the Hooked Scimitar, just taking advantage of that card we highlighted at the beginning of the broadcast. Secret Passage, to just make sure that the damage keeps going every single turn.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful archetype with a lot of different tricks that it can pull off now. This feels like a very roguey rogue that we've got here at this point. Being able to go for, like you said, Secret Passage to refill the hand. A lot of the lists, although Surrender is not including this, run the Wand Thief as well that can generate all kind of mage nonsense. Very powerful archetype, still lots of refining to be done in it, to be sure. But over on Flurry's side of the board, we're going to be seeing potentially our first Priest of the day if he comes to that point in his lineup. Most players are going to be banning it out of the way, seems to be the trend so far. But instead for Glory, he wanted to get rid of that Warrior, maybe due to his aggressive decks and playstyle.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think Glory's lineup does not match up very well against that Warrior from Flurry. It's even more tech for control. Tech to be control compared to Chonsu's list. It has the Kargath Blade Fist and Dr. Krasinov Cutting Class to keep the cycle going, and also a Plague of Wrath in there. So I think this one for Flurry has less of a flexible win condition, but it's definitely scarier for lineups like Glory. So we are going to get to see a Highlander Priest, as you said.
We are indeed going to be a very, very exciting matchup, I'm sure. I like that we're seeing from Glory a little bit of a different lineup from some of the other APAC players, because I think, having talked to some of the Europe GMs, some of the Europe GM practice group, even if they're not GMs themselves, like Orange and Fino, this feels like a little bit more the European decks that would be gone for here from Glory. In the Mage, which I think is a little bit underrepresented here in Asia Pacific, and even Aggro Rogue, I would argue as well, is a little bit underrepresented. So I think Glory, very potentially, as usual, ahead of the curve.
Yeah. We are very used to seeing from Glory similar deck lists to what Alitamu and Possessi would be bringing, but for these few weeks to begin the season, they're actually potentially facing off against each other because of the Swiss format. So we've also last season that when they have a chance to run up against each other, they wouldn't necessarily have the same lists. But I think this Rogue bring in particular is very, very ballsy from Glory, and I want to see if it works out for him.
Yeah, it's definitely not the most recent build of Rogue. That much is definitely fair to say. With the Vendetta package, I'm seeing feeling like the most common version of the deck now, with obviously Wand Thief able to get you some mage spells, as well as all the other nonsense that can occur in that deck. But I still think it's got a very, very strong matchup against a lot of the decks that are unable to lock down the board quickly enough, that very possibly being Druid for Glory, even though it's very highly represented.
Yes,
But now that we are... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that for the first matchup, although we've been talking about Priest and Rogue as the ones to watch, we are going to get to see another shot at Paladin over on Flurry's side as it faces off against the Mage you were talking about from Glory. I think Surrender in his matchup with Paladin, I thought that it would be very, very favored against what Chonsu had to bring, but it didn't quite end up getting to the finish line there. I'm curious to see if Flurry's slightly different build will help him out here, because he's rocking the double Blessing of Kings, which is not present in Surrender's list.
Yeah, double Blessing of Kings. He's also got the Argent Braggots, one of the most infamously powerful cards that was released in Scholomance Academy, which was absent from Surrender's deck. It has been cut from a few of the lists because it's obviously terrible in the early game. It's only really once you hit the mid game that it hits its power curve. Sorry, but I think it's still a worthy inclusion for Flurry and will be getting its moment in the sun. However, as you were saying in our first matchup that we have here in Paladin versus Mage, as the Mage, I've been having a lot of success here, I've got to say, especially Glory's list that runs double Devolving Missiles, a card which makes Paladins wake up in the night screaming at how powerful it is against all their buffs. I think that Glory is looking in a great spot to start things off with his aggressive lineup.
I'd have to agree. Playing a lot of Paladin recently, I think that the mages that really save all of their removal for the right time is difficult to deal with. But there's been a couple of mage players that just play to the curve, for example, or they just throw out their apprentice really quickly. And in those situations, Paladin can take the win quite easily. But I expect to see a lot more patience from Glory's end here.
It says explode!
I don't expect to see much patience, however, from Flurry's end. This hand has no chill whatsoever. This is lightning fast start. Coin Lightforged Crusader potential, or Zealot, sorry, if he wants to be able to go for a nice early swing of the True Silver to close things out, or just maximum development of 1-drops would also be very, very powerful.
Yeah, there's tons of 1-drops that are quite relevant these days. You can generate ones from other classes, so even something like the Sigil Runner from Demon Hunter to keep cycle going. Flame Imps are very, very well statted, and the Broomstick is a huge one that you can generate. But these are not it.
Yeah, Depth Charge you're not really looking for, I think it's fair to say. That is a huge whiff, and Timberwolf pretty much just a 1-1 with no beast synergy available in the deck. But it's bad, of course, this is not the outcome you're looking for. The curve, I think, still just about works out for Flurry here.
The Depth Charge is still quite interesting. He could just use it as a Scuffed Doomsayer, and then if it does get the effect off, then he can stick an Unchallenged Lightforge. I don't know, I'm just thinking, like, if it's not used, when is it gonna get used?
Flurry agrees. It's close, right? Because an uncontested Lightforged Zealot is not that good. You kind of want something to be able to swing into immediately with the weapon to kind of get the immediate benefit. But overall, I think you phrased it very well. If it's not being used now, it's never being used. And so it does just keep a clear board. Do with it what you will, Flurry. You've earned this benefit.
And Flurry not too upset about essentially giving up that buff that he used, because the blessing, Libram of Wisdom will just keep returning to the hand now. And as you said, the uncontested Lightforged is not a big deal, so instead Flurry is gonna go a little bit wider and hold on to that coin, potentially for the Truth Seeker, which I think is very, very warranted.
Yeah, the only real question was whether or not he wanted to start getting these repeated reduction in mana cost for the Devote Pupil with the Libram of Wisdom. I can understand why he instead wanted to go a little bit wider and hold back on it. But again, it shows that this Paladin deck is not as straightforward as it would immediately seem.
It does remind me a lot of Highlander Hunter of old, in the sense that there aren't too many decisions, but when there are big ones, you better get them right. For now, though, sticking to the curve looks very solid to me.
How do you feel about Coin Aldal Truth Seeker, Libram of Wisdom trade, and then Libram of Wisdom again? It starts to really reduce the cost of Devout Pupil.
That's a pretty good point. I guess there's something to be said for ending the turn with 2 minions on board as opposed to 1 against a deck that likes to freeze things. Yikes.
This is a horrible swap for Glory. Is he just going to throw down Evocation basically purely for the spell burst?
Yep, I think he is. And does pick up at least some 1-mana spells to end the turn with.
That's pretty good. You'd take that.
I guess he recognizes that this is not a situation where he can afford to be greedy with the Evocation.
Right.
He has fallen very far behind. And the fact that he generated a spell that generates something else is compounding effects for these mana giants. So I think Glory is just saying, let me generate another Evocation when I need it.
Yeah, I also like the pick of Cobalt Geomancer there. I think it was very tempting to go for the Dragon for a bit of extra value. But the fact that this can be played with the mana giant on this turn, I think shows good recognition that tempo is the name of the game right now. He has to lock this board down very quickly.
Another Primordial Studies for Glory. Don't think there's a way to get down both Mana Giant, unfortunately, but even just one to be able to challenge the 5/7 is a bill. He'll always be scared of the Blessing of Authority, but scarier if he doesn't put anything on board.
I like his hesitation there for a second, because it looked like we were going to see from Glory a very, very quick play onto the board there indeed. But there was some real consideration to hold on to the Primordial Studies for an extra turn, just to be able to have another spell with Shenvala. Maybe you can get an activation next turn. In the end, he lets rip with it, just trying to open up his options a little bit more. But it's still, I think, good recognition.
I do like that he held on to the 2 smaller minions though and just deny Flurry a value trade on board. Unfortunately though, for Glory, but not unexpectedly given the amount of buffs, there's still going to be a value trade available, and the High Abyss allows Flurry to get even more threat.
And I think quite appropriately for having drawn Argent Braggart here, this Paladin deck, it's big, it's kind of stupid, but it's really, really powerful when it just does what the deck is supposed to do.
And speaking of what the deck is supposed to do, Glory exact opposite. He's drawn all of the minions. He did use some spells at the beginning, but none that he didn't have to. And everything just did not come together. And the more I look at these types of outcomes, the more I understand why you would prioritize keeping card draw when it's available. Cram Session, Arcane Intellect, very essential. Pretty miserable here for Glory.
Yeah, it's just absolute disaster town.
There's not even the evocation left as an out, so we're looking at Wand Thief into something?
Yeah. I mean, even Libram of Hope here is low-key completely insane, being able to heal up the Aldor Truthseeker. You can get down the Pupil as well. I'm just not really seeing any way that Glory can generate enough tempo to wrestle this one back, outside of, I guess, Solarian Prime, if it can come off the top.
Right. I think that is the big consideration for Flurry now, because he can clearly see, just as you mentioned, that there's potential to develop 3 more big minions. But does he need to go all in the case that Glory generates the freeze, trades off his Solarian, and then gets the Prime on the turn immediately after? Right. So Flurry's thinking, is there a way that I can just set up not all of these minions? And I think it's completely fair, because he can set up 2-turn lethal just with a couple.
I do love a good study session.
Although it's worth noting that the Argent Braggart, when held in hand, is not necessarily a threat.
True, that is true. And Devolving Missiles being found is one of the better cards for Glory, it's got to be said. If he can snipe off a couple of good targets, including the Truthseeker.
What?
Yikes! And it gives Dust Devil?
A good 1-drop? I mean, it's pingable, but...
Oh, what a high roll for Glory.
Why have these missiles been like this, even for Surrender with the Squall Hunter a while ago? When did they call it Evolving Missiles?
Haha.
Well...
Oh my god. Is that just lethal now with the buffs that you get from Libram of Wisdom? It is, right? Triple buff?
Yeah. I don't know how many he played, but it's gotta be enough. Oh my goodness. That was an absolute stomp from Flurry there. And even though we could sing the praises of this Mage deck every day, the fact that it does have so many scam opportunities comes with witches. It comes with a lot of dead draws here and there.
That's right. When you try and just go toe-to-toe with Paladin, you are going to lose. Because Paladin, what it's meant to do in this build of the deck is curve out, stick just 1 minion if that's all you need, and then start the buff train rolling. You've got Argent Braggart. They can do a great job of following that up. Of course, Devout Pupil as well is completely insane when you get it down for 0 mana. And the Mage needs to have these power turns. It needs to bide its time, build up all these spells in combination with Mana Giant, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mana Cyclone, Shenvala can be very powerful as well. And if you're just playing out your cards for tempo in a piecemeal fashion, you're not going to be winning. So hopefully for Glory, not trying to criticize his gameplay too much, the hand really just didn't come together for him there. Hopefully he can turn things around in the coming games.
I have to say, Mage has not been looking too good in the 2 times we've seen it on stream so far. So I took a quick glance at the win rates of these decks during the Swiss portion when all 16 of the Asia-Pacific GMs were playing it out. Mage was sitting towards the middle with a 47% win rate, but it turns out Paladin was doing even worse, by far the worst out of the entire field with 37%. So even though I feel like Paladin is built to be a bit more consistent, maybe the Mage has some... I think in terms of skill edge to be gained for these decks, I think more practice on Mage would gain you a lot more percent than more practice on Paladin.
Agreed completely. And Glory is going to be able to get in a little bit more practice as he is going to be having to play his Mage deck again if he wants to be able to win the series, given that Flurry is now 1-0 up. But before we conclude this thrilling series, our second match of the day, we're going to go to a quick break before we come back with Glory versus Flurry here at Hearthstone Grandmasters.
조금 어려운 것 같은데.
볼트.
もしボートを持っていたらペンギン号と名付けます
일단 타는 거니까 천슈 슈즈 해가지고 천수 슈즈 줄여서 천슈.
샤크.
ボートがあったらリロイ号とつけます。
If I have a boat, I would name Thousand Sun because I like the name in One Piece.
我应该就会写上自己的名字吧，就是说自己可以买到这个。
그냥 제 닉네임인 플러리로 지을 것 같아요. 단 하나뿐인 배니까.
로드 투 월드 챔피언십.
You are watching Hearthstone Grandmasters here on the Hearthstone Esports YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification. Feels so weird saying that instead of seeing people say it, to make sure that you're always notified of when we go live with our Hearthstone Esports action. Of course, happening every Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the next 8 weeks, or I suppose 9 weeks actually, as we of course have a Masters Tour sandwiched in the middle, which will be a lot of fun to jump into. But of course, right at the start now, we're going to be focusing on the games here in APAC. Glory versus Flurry is our match right now. Glory, of course, once again, our representative who is going through to the World Championships later this year. And Flurry, on the other side, very possibly, or very close to relegation at the end of last season. So the absolute opposite ends of the spectrum of these two players. And yet meeting here now in the top 8 after the first part of the Swiss portion played out over the last couple of days. And despite what you might think, Flurry is in the lead.
Yeah, he's already taken a win with that Paladin over the Mage here, and honestly, it's might be too early to say, but it's already feeling like the players that didn't quite perform as well as the likes of Glory and Surrender are already starting to turn the tables. We know very well that Glory won not just the Swiss portion, but the round robin portion last season. There could be a chance now for others to come after him. And Flurry is going to go at it again with a Druid deck. Overgrowth in the opener, always a welcome sight. Lightning Bloom as well.
Yeah, very, very powerful start. But on the other side for Glory, a full keep there in the mulligan.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like it a lot. The only card I was considering mulliganing away was Firebrand, which I feel like is not really made for the Druid matchup quite so much. But we've already seen today what it can do against Twilight Runner if that's just played out on turn 5, or for 5 mana, I should say. So it's really not a bad card to be keeping at all here.
Right. And we had this discussion about how the Druid decks were built for Flurry and Chonsu a while ago, where they actually have a very small beast package, just 4 beasts, 1 Lake Thrasher, 1 Teacher's Pet, double Twilight Runner. And so that means that it's very likely that the second Guardian Animals does not get the full value off of it. And so I do think that this particular build, you're less likely to see the Twilight Runner played out instead of being pulled out with Rush. I think Flurry and Chonsu have gone all in on the philosophy that if you have Overgrowth, you're going to naturally playing a beast turn anyway.
An interesting choice here for sure for Flurry, because he's probably looking at just going like Overgrowth, Overflow, I would imagine, as the expected game plan. Or I suppose Overgrowth and then Innovate or Lightning Bloom Ysera. Which means we could be looking at Strength of Numbers just because it's cheap and it can fit into that curve easily.
That's what I'm looking at as well. And there's honestly no whiffs in terms of minions he can pull out. Of course, there are better results than others, but the smallest minion he could get is the Teacher's Pet at 4/5, or Twilight Runner if you want to flip it around. And in terms of the higher rolls, he could pull out either of the 2 exotic Mount Sellers, which are still in
true.
Or Kael'thas even. I'm quite surprised to see the Nourish there in the end.
Just a little bit of extra card draw, I suppose, in the insurance policy that he misses any extra card draw after the overflow. But I agree with you. I think I was leaning towards the strength in numbers there personally, even if it didn't have an immediate upside.
What surprises me is the use of this Sorcerer's Apprentice this turn, Derek. I feel like it's not getting very much done, and in a deck that runs Bog Beams and Crystal Power, I don't know how likely it is to stick. However, maybe Glory's thinking that this is the Overgrowth turn, so the Sorcerer's Apprentice would at least stave off some of the threats from Glory this turn.
And I think this is... I'm really, really glad that you brought this up, because I think for me personally, trying to break through the top 100 barrier with my Tempo Mage play at the moment, the next step for me is to just be more liberal with my Sorcerer's Apprentices. I am too greedy with them, and I only want to use them on the powerful turns, whereas there are opportunities to throw them down and get that immediate mana utilization to set up for more powerful plays later on. And although it's yet to be seen whether or not it will pay off, Glory thinks he's found that spot.
Yeah, I guess with the way his hand was built, the curve was looking like play that into the Jandis Barov, which is not a card that's seen in every Mage list, but pretty powerful in that you get essentially 3/5 drops for the cost of 1. Of course, one of them is understated, but a lot of the time you can't fully guess which one is the one that dies upon any damage.
Yeah, with 2 identical minions here in stats, this is where the real mind games start to set in as to which one you believe your opponent's going to set to 1.
And honestly, a lot of the time, decks these days, if they're dealing any damage at all, it could be enough to kill the minion anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
So you often get the full value out of these. And the Apprentice sticks another turn. There's a Cyclone now. Oh my goodness.
Man, this is working out great for Glory. There is no way that I would have gone for this line from him. And yet now he gets the Cyclone down. He has all the mana from the Apprentice already played. So plenty of mana to follow up with the Cyclone after. This is very, very heads-up play from Glory.
Pretty nasty for Flurry. Gets another 1-cost spell. That is pretty good. Quest is likely to be completed in this case. But Flurry did manage to develop that Ysera, so Overflow could give him something big here.
I guess this was the thought process overall for Flurry, is that he wouldn't be able to play Overflow directly after the
Right,
Nourish. So it makes sense in conclusion. He could have gone, I guess, therefore, for Innovate and then innovated out the Overflow. But at the end of it all, Glory, with his high-tempo approach, just playing out the cards in his hand, imagine such a novel idea, ends up the victor.
I mean, I do think that the Sorcerer's Apprentice turn he put it was something that you and I did not spot, and it did work out very well. I wonder, though, if it was a little bit results-oriented, given the fact that the Mana Cyclone came off the top a little bit later. I do think that the timing makes sense, though. He wanted to disrupt the Overgrowth turn, and maybe the hand wasn't looking like it was going to pop off with Mana Cyclone later on, and it just became a fit that he top decked it later.
Yeah, and if we look at the way that the Mana Cyclone plays into that equation, or I guess any payoff card for Sorcerer's Apprentice, be it Shenvala or Evocation or Mana Cyclone there, all of them still are good if you keep it in hand. Either way, it's good if he gets a payoff card. So this way, it's he's consolidated his game plan, I suppose, a little bit more by getting it out early and just getting in that damage from the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And so I think that's, even though that's definitely not a line that I would have spotted there as a way to go, on average, it's probably just a better way to go for Glory, even if it does have its inherent risks. So I think very, very nice play here that we're seeing across the board, actually, in our first couple of series. And at 1-1, now we're going to be seeing the Rogue in action here.
Well, you're saying about the Rogue, and I was saying that I was very, very excited to see this, but I am distracted by the fact that there's a priest that made it through the ban phase. And Flurry's list is of the Highlander variant, the one that's far more popular in APAC, Zephyrus already entering the hand. This could be very problematic for Glory to deal with, but I have to say, stealth is a mechanic that Priest, I think, has a bit more problems dealing with. And if you're very careful about when you unstealth certain threats from the side of the Rogue, I think you can definitely get there.
However, I think for Glory here, while you bring up a great point about wanting to be careful about when you unstealth your minions, he's going pretty clearly here at just attacking face, being the game plan here, to try and get the damage in as soon as possible.
When I say careful, I tend to mean that when you unstealth, in particular, this 3-1, the name is escaping me.
Sneaky Delinquent?
Yes, Sneaky Delinquent. You want to unstealth it on the turn when you don't have any other threats, so that Shadow Madness, for example, or even now the Cabal Acolyte has become a threat. And so you give yourself more chances to end up with the Death Rattle Self in hand, and that's another 3 damage, and it compounds and it compounds. Glory has full knowledge now of what Glory has in hand.
It's kind of close, because these are all pretty bad, to be perfectly honest for him. Like, Hooked Scimitar is nice to clear the board, but you have to tank the damage in your own right, and generally they're very low health minions, so it's a fairly inefficient weapon. But then are you just taking Deckhand as a 2-1? I suppose that's alright.
Yeah, that was what I was looking at as well. Nothing quite works without the other cards together. Although given that his next turn looks to be very, very little mana utilization, might as well take the Hook Scimitar to fill out the rest of the mana.
Might as well.
Silence on this for Glory is quite annoying because now he won't get the second 3-1 to pair with that Ashtung Slayer.
Yeah,
but it's really just become a discrete damage calculation for Glory now.
And this is already, I think, a good indication of why most players have moved away from this particular build of Rogue that relies very heavily on the stealth part of the deck, with the Ashtung Slayers, the Greyheart Sages, and all that as well, and instead moved on to a slightly more kind of Discover version with Wand Thief and the Vendettas as well as the Dragon's Horde, to be able to get a little bit more tempo rolling. And also you're not so reliant on these combos like Ashtung Slayer, which can be fickle at the best of times.
Yeah, Glory's deck definitely is very linear for flexibility. It does get what it needs to do done very effectively when you run into the card draw pretty consistently, the Greyheart Sage and the Sage. But when those aren't available, it does look like it fizzles out extremely quickly.
And weirdly enough, even though the Hooked Scimitar cannot really be efficiently comboed here. It's basically the same thing. A 2-attack weapon
Right.
is doing pretty much the exact same thing as a 4-attack weapon. And I think will probably be the way that Flurry has to end up going here.
I believe that outside of Greyheart Sage, all of the minions from Glory's deck are 2 health or less anyway.
Ooh.
Rough to draw that. I mean, it's just now a hooked scimitar plan, right? Oh, he's still holding on. I guess because if you add up what damage there is currently, if you factor in that the 3-1 and the deckhand will probably get removed the turn they're the following turn, it's a little bit short. So at the Greyheart Sage instead here for Glory. But my head in the situation would be at, I need to top deck the second Sinister Strike or Secret Passage or Eviscerate here. I want to not give Flurry 1 extra turn, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point that you could go for the top deck of extra damage, but I think quite clearly Flurry has shown inability to clear off your board without tanking damage in his own right. So getting a minion down here to potentially just connect face again is also a very valid line to consider.
Oh. But if he... Okay. So the Elucia, obviously he doesn't want to give coin into 7-drop as an option for Glory. So he
insane.
could coin now and then Elucia and pull... Is it good? Flurry just wants to make sure he's not dead next turn and then be able to play Galakron on the following to heal up a bit more.
I mean, it depends what your opponent's hand is, right? Because if they have minions, being able to go coin Elucia and then just play a minion is okay.
I mean, from Flurry's perspective, he's just dead to 1 damage because he doesn't have... well, there's Forbidden Words to be able to get rid of the 3-1. So maybe the play is just heal Forbidden Words then.
Yeah, definitely heal first. The Flurry gave me a small heart attack there by reaching for the Forbidden Words. But these were the 2 real ways to be gone. We can see with Caster Vision that the Elucia play would work out pretty well. But in the end, Flurry does go just for mopping up what he can. And we can clearly see for Glory, his plan of not developing the Greyheart Sage last turn has been pretty disastrous. There would not have been the way for Flurry to cleanly deal with both of them there on that turn. He would have had to have tanked it with his face and would very possibly have been dead as a result of that.
And that gives Flurry so much more breathing room now, whether he wants to heal up with the Galakron armor or get down a Tiamat for Taunt. I think Taunt is pretty similar to Direct in this situation because it's just Eviscerate that goes over the top there. He could have a read on perhaps Sap being in hand for Glory as one of these dead cards. That's a consideration as well. But the fact that Glory's only showing a 1-attack minion now, I think lets Flurry go for Taunt here.
I think Sap is a pretty strong read to make, but also you need to actually win the game at some point.
Right. We could have actually seen the rare Taunt Wind Fury? Okay.
And so the Sap, while not in the hand, does end up coming off the top here as well.
And Glory needs to go for it even though he doesn't have lethal because Apotheosis is such a huge threat. If any minion on Flurry's side sticks, it's suddenly going to be so much healing. And so Glory's outs here, it's Secret Passage or a cheap stealth minion into Eviscerates or another Sap. Assuming that from Flurry we just see another Tiamat, but he could just go for Galakron here instead.
Yeah. I mean, you've just seen a Sap, right? I feel like you feel pretty safe. A Sap off the top. You feel safe going to see him again.
Sure. Yeah, because ultimately he would still need to apotheose something to get out of the problem he's been for the past few turns. But this for Glory could make all the difference. Now he can play that deckhand and backstab first, then go for the passage. So if he gets Eviscerate, Sap, it needs to be a combination of 2 things. Oh, attack first here is really interesting to me because Hooked Scimitar exists.
Right. guess he's thinking maybe like Burrowing Scorpid can be used to clear it off then, and maybe you hit something else.
Okay. Yeah, there's... Okay. That's still fine. He just eviscerates this and goes for the cold blood to the face. But I am unsure about whether he was supposed to dagger the Tiamat first.
It was an interesting game all around because, of course, Glory there had a few different ways to approach that. Flurry, in his own right as well, it's worth saying, also had a couple of different points that I didn't consider. By playing Madame Lazul at the start of the game, he actually knew the contents of Glory's hand, and so the Alusha became, I think, a little bit more tempting because he knew that there were just minions in hand at that point, and had a much better idea that there was no just cheap spells knocking about. It was a very interesting way to approach the matchup from both players.
For sure. And this is yet another deck we can compare to Libram Paladin, I suppose, in that there's very, very few decisions in terms of overall game plan. You tend to just go for the way the deck is built. In the case of Paladin, it's curving out. In the case of this rogue, it's dealing face damage. But you can really see the difference that one decision to play a minion or not play it can make in the overall endgame.
You can indeed. And I think that even though this version of Rogue is not necessarily the one that players are going to end up on, it clearly has its merits. The high amount of stealth minions make it difficult for the priest to answer effectively because, you know, they don't want to use an individual removal spell on all these one health minions. They'll run out of them incredibly quickly, which is the real power of these high attack, low health, stealth rogue minions that have been doing very, very well. But now, with that out of the way, the Druid is the last remaining deck for Glory, and it does appear to me to be the much more standard version of the deck. No exotic mount sellers in there, just running the slightly heavier suite of beasts that he's going for with double Teacher's Pet, double Twilight Runner, and the Lake Thrasher, as well as all the rampant Kael'thas nonsense we've come to know and love.
It is going to be the mirror, where I think it is very, very important to be patient with the stealth on the Twilight Runners. That was definitely the first mistake I made when I was playing this deck on ladder and running up into the mirror. If you just get too excited with attacking face and getting the card draw, suddenly your opponent, when they play theirs, and wait for a buff to land and then get the value trades, that's when everything starts going wrong. Looking at the strength of numbers again.
Yeah, exactly. Is it more tempting here, do you think?
Given the content of his hand, probably not, because he only has that one Twilight Runner to start spending on minions. Could just go for Worthy instead, try and hit some card draw, if it's Rising Winds or even Nourish.
I actually do like it here. Again, I think it's the way to go, because the deck has a whole bunch of 5-cost minions, right, with all the 5-cost beasts and Anubisath defenders as well, which just so beautifully curves out in a fairly likely draw, I think.
Alright. For Glory here, I'm definitely liking the look of partner assignment because it gives him something to do, whereas the rest of his hand is very, very slow. He needs to hit Overgrowth to get anything of substance done.
Already the second Twilight Runner available for Flurry. This could be a pretty impressive curve if he's able to get out Kael'thas or the exotic mount sellers from his deck for a huge amount of tempo.
And Glory is still holding on to that partner assignment here, probably for a Kael'thas turn. Doesn't care at all about developing some small minions because they tend to just get eaten up by guardian animals on either side.
Well, if we want to talk about how the earliest guardian animals is the winner in the matchup, it could have come down for Flurry on this turn. But what do you think his thought process is behind just leaving it unplayed here?
Maybe the fact that the minions it summon will guaranteed not have stealth because he has the 2 Twilight Runners. If there is a responding combo of Lightning Bloom and Guardian Animals, he could just get value traded in an unfortunate way and fall behind from that point. But I have to say I was definitely looking at going for it.
He's going to have to be careful because he's starting to run out of beasts, actually, especially as Flurry is playing the lighter package, I believe. He actually only has 1 beast left in his deck at this point, so now Guardian Animals has just become kind of bad.
It's 2, right? Oh, wait. It's 2 Teacher's Pet for Glory, but 1 for Flurry, you're right.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That's a 7 mana, just summon a Lake Thrasher with Rush.
Not terrible, but not the game-ending turn that you'd want it to be most of the time.
Definitely not. So Flurry is thinking about, I suppose, the order on this, because that second runner would complete his quest. Probably still just go for it first. And then if he hits Kael'thas, it's oh no beast left.
Okay. Guardian animals, but unfortunately, all the beasts have apparently gone fishing or something. They're busy doing other stuff.
That's a yikes. Especially since Glory's hand is shaped the opposite way, where his guardian animals is at full potential. He can follow up with Kael'thas, and by that point the Bog Beam will cost 0. It's getting very scary now for Flurry.
And I mean, in response, Glory is going to start doing some pretty ludicrously powerful stuff of his own right in the next few turns. Obviously with Kael'thas and...
I'm looking at animals this turn. If he hits the Thresher, he can snipe off that Twilight Runner. Didn't get it, but still fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering if he was supposed to go for, like, Innovate, Partner Assignment, and then Kael'thas on this turn with the Guardian Animals. But I think, even though that gets a little bit more immediate tempo, it's worth saving it for the potential power spike next turn.
Right, I think this line I like a lot better, because if he does end up with the 2 stealths and not the Thresher, then he can just make sure they stick on board for the survival turn. And that pretty much locks out the game, but Flurry with the Ysera now can potentially put more threats on the board.
The game definitely entering overdrive now, with both players able to put down Ysera in the next couple of turns. And Flurry, you know, we've been questioning a couple of his lines with valuing the importance of Guardian Animal. What this line does allow him to do, of course, is get down that early Ysera and start cheating out those beasts, those dragons, sorry. Which he's going to have to do, because he is falling quite substantially far behind on the board now.
With the Nature Studies draw as well, Glory can also fit in that overflow, heal back up the minions that he's value trading in. I guess it's very likely that this would happen, but given the draws with the Twilight Runners, but oh my god, this is just Druid at its peak performance.
It really is.
Oh no, I don't have hand space, is what Glory's
literally.
thinking.
I guess you just burn a card.
Who cares at this point?
Yeah,
he is so far ahead. Have another guard. I know, have another survival. He can do both.
What is happening?
Just Druid things. I have to say the Druid Mirror is maybe going a little bit more towards late game than it did last meta, but it is far more explosive now.
He had 2 mana left over at the end of all of that to play the Steel Beetle as well.
Kind of feels like when you're playing APM Pirates and you can't even spend all your gold in Battlegrounds. But Glory...
Yeah, there we go.
Flurry just leaned all the way off screen, almost as if he was disgusted with what he did.
Yeah, I mean, that's just sitting back after a hard day's work right there. That kind of Druid gameplay does not come easy, let me tell you. Turn 7, he missed all the ramp cards at all points in the game there, but was still able to unleash the power of Kael'thas. One of the reasons, I think, justifiably why players have been calling out for maybe a second look at Kael'thas, even though it's gone from 6 to 7 mana, it's quite clearly still a ludicrously powerful card when demonstrated there exactly what it can do.
Well, you're looking at Kael'thas. In my opinion, the problem card is Lightning Bloom. When Innervate was deemed too powerful for Druid, and then you put it back in a meta where Kael'thas exists, I feel like that's the card that really allows Kael'thas to consistently get its effect out. But we'll see. All I want to say, though, is that I'm glad that for day 1 we get to see that type of Druid, because it is very representative of what's going on in Ladder.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think Dr. Bloom could also go with a bit of a tune-up in terms of what it's able to do in Druid. Not so much in Shaman. I would kind of feel bad if that ends up having to suffer for Druid sins, as it has no representation here in APAC whatsoever. But with that out of the way, I believe with Glory going up to win here in the series, up against Flurry, despite losing in the first game, he's going to be going up to face against Chonsu in our winners match, which we're just going to take a second to set up. That's going to be our next match of the day to find out who will go through the semi-finals to be played out on Sunday. We'll be right back with Chonsu versus Glory.